Welcome back to our discussion, Cloud Strategies to Fulfill the Mission, sponsored by Motorola Solutions here in Federal News Network. My guests today are Tom Hines. He's the Director of Engineering and Technology Transformation for the Military Health System. We've got Sanjay Gupta, is the Chief Technology Officer at the Small Business Administration. Devarius Peoples is Chief Information Officer, G6 for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and Mark McNulty, Corporate Vice President and General Manager of U.S. Federal at Motorola Solutions. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And before the break, we were getting into cloud, which is probably the biggest topic, well, one of the biggest anyway, on the minds of pretty much anyone connected to the federal government. And so maybe, and I think there's no agency that doesn't have a cloud strategy of some kind. Cloud and communications services hosted in the cloud is our topic today. So, Devarius, why don't we start with you? Give us the cloud picture for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and what sorts of hosted communications systems and services you're looking at for cloud delivery.
All right, so cloud is an integral part into our modernization strategy, and we've started down the path of identifying in a cloud smart manner, not just to be cloud ready, but doing it in a cloud smart manner, because the reality is for the core, everything won't go to the cloud. So with that being said, we have to take into account many different factors: responsiveness, network latency, cost transparency, service levels. And we have to begin to also think about our resources or our end users that are also trying to leverage the capability, because all of those things will either make you or break you when it comes to cloud migration. So with that being said, we have moved several major mission critical systems to the cloud, or we are almost 100% there. One of them being our financial management system, which is pretty much the heartbeat of the core, especially dealing around a lot of our finances. And we've also moved to O365, so capabilities such as email, which is a mission critical warfighting system, because it allows us to effectively communicate back and forth. And then we're also leveraging things such as CVR, which is the commercial virtual remote environment, which is pretty much Teams that the DoD CIO has leveraged, allowed us to leverage and rolled out. So our cloud journey is well underway. And with that being said, we've seen various improvements with regards to how we access certain applications, as well as from an effectiveness, being able to do our job and collaborate. So with all of those different factors being baked in, I think the cloud journey is, as I said, well underway, but it's also showing us that if leveraged properly, then you'll see a lot of success. But if you don't take the time to really map those things out from a communications perspective, you'll either have degradation in comms, a lot of mission downtime, and your efficiency and effectiveness won't be seen. So that's why we're moving in a cloud smart manner, and also to be able to show from a cost transparency perspective how much we're actually being able to reinvest in other things. So the cloud has helped us out in many different ways.
Okay, and Sanjay, what about SBA?
I'd say, let me kind of give a few examples from a communications angle, Tom, first, and then I'll go a little broader from that perspective. In addition to what Devarius just talked about, one of the things we have found by using cloud-based integrated voice and data solutions for either communications or collaboration, a few of the features I'll just highlight which are relevant and important. For example, if you're doing an event with multiple people external to the agency or internal to the agency, you have these cloud-based and cloud-hosted solutions that allow you to almost near real time, I would say, do translation into multiple languages. That's a feature which is obviously of benefit. It also allows you closed captioning done in an automated manner, so help you from an accessibility angle. Now, having said all of those, I will also caution to say that, yes, those are capabilities that are, let's just say, a little rough around the edges for now. And certainly there's some room for improvement. Then we can also look at the ability to do, once you record those sessions, and you can do a search if you are coming back later on using metadata tags. And you can search for a particular event or a name or some metadata that you're looking for. So if you are looking at a recording of a 1-hour session, and let's say you want to see a reference to your own name, you can look for that and see and get to that point. So I'm just illustrating some of these capabilities that today's cloud-hosted solutions offer de facto out of the box. let me kind of switch from a slightly different angle, which is from a connectivity standpoint. Just from context, SBA, we were about 4,000 from a staffing standpoint early March of this year. When I say staff, meaning contractors and feds. Right now, we are about 14,000 plus. So you can imagine as we're growing in the staff, and most of their staff is in a telework status. So we have used cloud-based secure connectivity solutions that allowed this workforce, as you can see, about 10,000 plus people, and we're still adding, to connect in a secure fashion, in a high performance manner, and with a good customer experience, because ultimately we need them to be productive. We need them to be capable to perform their duties and responsibilities in a secure manner. So certainly some of those are other examples of how we're using this. And certainly one other final example I'll talk about is we're using cloud-based or cloud-hosted solutions for doing things like sentiment analysis on inbound emails. As you would imagine, we're getting a ton of inquiries via email through our customer support email boxes. And so what we're doing is we applied natural language processing capabilities. So we are able to harvest some sentiments based on the inflow of the emails. And those are, by the way, in millions of emails we're talking about. And doing it in an automated manner allows us to now see that. That informs our ability to modify our frequently asked questions, our policy positions, and also look for our other applications, what changes possibly we may be able to make based on the customer sentiment analysis. So that's some of the few examples, I'd say, from an SBA perspective.
And Mark, let me ask you, in the communications realm, with this idea of bringing all this data together in a communication standpoint, which may or may not include voice, but it might be just simply exchange of information of various sources in a situation or in a context. Is it possible to inculcate all of these different cloud instances that might be different commercial clouds through a communications device?
It is, as the various mentioned, right, and with his smart cloud comment. I think we see it, look, all the benefits of cloud apply to emergency response. They apply to national defense, homeland security, and law enforcement functions, whether we're talking about security, reliability, or lower costs, right? I think what we're seeing in the space where we are around public safety, law enforcement, national defense is that it will be more of an evolution than a revolution. But these cloud native technologies are actually allowing us, as I mentioned before, the traditional land mobile radio and now wireless broadband, whether that's LTE or even agency level Wi-Fi, the ability to integrate those technologies together is being enabled by cloud technologies, right? So enabling any device on any network to be able to connect with one another, whether that's for the exchange of data or even in the case of the exchange of push-to-talk voice, right? So connecting an LMR radio with a broadband push-to-talk application running on a smart device or a tablet. So there's certainly, and then there's new capabilities that we're going to deliver as well. I talked about the convergence of LMR and LTE into a single device. That device running an Android, operating system now brings new capabilities to those first responders in a single device as opposed to disparate devices. Or if they want to carry separate devices, how do we leverage those two things together with Bluetooth so that they're aware of one another, they're aware of each other's capabilities, and they're going to leverage whichever network happens to be available. And again, cloud, and we're seeing it obviously with the pandemic, we're seeing it with the hurricanes that were mentioned earlier, folks being removed from their typical workplace all across government, 911 centers that are sitting now leveraging cloud technology for 911 call taking, leveraging cloud technology for still doing their computer-aided dispatching and getting resources where they need to be, while perhaps working outside of the impact zone of a hurricane or working from home because of the global pandemic.
Got it. And I want to ask Tom Hines to follow up on that, because there is both a data integration and a location capability. I think you talked about that before the break, locating patients, locating different hospital assets. Is the clinical data from systems that are, protected in other ways for privacy purposes and so on, is that also something you're looking to get integrated into the communications such that all the people anywhere that we're trying to locate in a facility or in the field can have the knowledge they need to be able to do something about whatever the situation might be. If that made sense.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about a particular service that there might be interest in, and that's our nurse call services. If you think about a tier 1 help desk scenario, and there's been some discussion about folks taking calls and things to provide service to the community, we do the same thing for patients. And that is a cloud-based implementation for that service. It's really a call center, effectively, with some cloud services integrated with it, which then in turn communicates with a system that we call TRICARE Online. TRICARE Online is the primary patient portal for all of our beneficiaries. It's a place where people can go to get information and request service and support. But that's tied in with the nurse call line. So, for example, if you believe you have COVID or some suspicion that someone in your family needs treatment, you can enter that data in TOL. It triggers a call to you. You don't have to call the nurse call line, who then will walk you through a kind of a diagnostic procedure on the line, record that information. They know from our systems who your primary care physician. They can then schedule a follow-up appointment, which today, as much as anything, is done virtually, of course, to avoid that contact in the clinical setting. And of course, your patient record is then updated based on that encounter information. And then we then do follow-up via that same TOL system, which goes to the patient's phone to make sure they were satisfied with the encounter and do they need additional support. That's just one example of how we're using these types of things in the clinical setting.
All right, and that brings up the question, and I'm going to ask you, Sanjay, first. That is, we have a third element, if you will, in access, and that is the person being served, the citizen or the recipient of whatever the output of that federal mission might be. And that raises all kinds of questions about the systems and the data available, and what's your thinking there, and what are you trying to engineer in that situation?
Yeah, I think let me just kind of reflect back just on the initial question, Tom, you had asked about integration and how are we using location data. So let me give you 2 quick examples, and I'll also address your question after that. And I think these are pretty insightful and impactful examples. So first off, let me talk about geofencing. So one of the things I led the implementation of early in March, when I say early in March, actually in the last week of March, is I recognized I was looking at our inbound traffic at all of the various SBA web properties, whether disaster loan applications or the PPP loan applications. And I realized that, we had traffic coming from outside the continental United States. And I realized very quickly we had a simple way to, if you will, block that traffic, because these programs obviously are intended only for the continental United States. So we implemented geofencing. It's a very simple solution based on some of the cybersecurity tools we have. Simply put, what it allows us to do is it restricts the traffic based on the origin of the traffic. It looks at the IP address. Based on the IP address, you know where you're coming from, if you will, that originating IP. And very simply, if you do not belong to, it's a simple rule set which says if that IP is not from the continental United States, you block the traffic. So what's the implication of that? Obviously, we were getting a lot of traffic from outside the United States. I don't want to say that everything was coming is necessarily nefarious, but the fact that we can use simple technology solutions to block that traffic, I can just only imagine how many applicants we could have, or applications we may have received, which probably did not qualify because they were not, if you will, meeting the first eligibility criteria that you need to be from the continental United States. So again, talk about locational data and the application of location data using cloud-based solutions and services to do that. And certainly, I don't want to diminish the cybersecurity angle as well. That allowed us to improve it from that standpoint as well. So that's sort of example 1. Let me give you a simple example number 2, which I know we're in the process of implementation. And I mentioned earlier about using voice over IP solutions. And we are in the process of migrating our staff into a pure voice over IP solution. So I know you referenced earlier desk phones. Yes, do we still have a desk phone? Yes, but it's a voice over IP device. So for example, I've been obviously like most others in a telework status. So my phone, quote unquote, has followed me, meaning if somebody calls my phone number, it rings either on my laptop or if I'm online, or it'll ring on my GFE phone if my laptop is not on. And the person who's calling me, he or she would never ever know where I was because for them, I'm connecting to them. And another aspect of that, again, and I think it's nothing earth-shattering, is voicemail. We are able to now deliver voicemail as a email, and it automatically is converted in a transcription form of it. So you can quote unquote read your voicemail if you know what I'm meaning by that. Again, having said that, I will also qualify those things are a little rough on the edges, so the transcription is not necessarily 100% exact, accurate, but nonetheless, that capability is now existing from a locational standpoint. So those are just some two examples that I think are pretty relevant from a communications and locational data use of that from what you said. So one of the things we have been looking into is much like that I talked about the example of geofencing. Obviously, we are examining data even which for traffic that originates from the continental United States, and not for purposes of sort of at an aggregate level to see where are we seeing quote unquote the hotspots of the citizen traffic coming in into our various web properties and web portals, just to understand if we need to do something to help improve performance for those regions, geographical areas, cities, counties, or locales, because certainly we can work with some of the telecom providers and see if we are seeing a surge in traffic from a particular quote unquote hot zone. We can work to alleviate those concerns from that standpoint. So that's one way we're looking at it. The other thing, obviously, is always fascinating is seeing just sort of overlaying the information from a citizen standpoint and sort of putting it on a geographical map, and then sort of seeing where are we seeing the most activities and where are we not seeing enough activity, if you will, right? And then once you start sort of looking at that, and then kind of, obviously there's many layering you can do, like the census data, you layer it with, and that gives you a sense of the population. So for example, if you're seeing not enough traffic coming from a state, say like Montana, it's likely that, there may not have been enough population density there to generate that kind of a traffic, as an example, or versus New York City as an example, or LA, right? So we're doing some of that analysis as well to see how, where is the traffic coming from and what is it causing from a standpoint of services consumption from a SPA standpoint. I would say we are still certainly in the early stages of how we can utilize this, but certainly we have some ideas of how we can certainly make a more informed use going forward. Certainly it's an aggregate level, so I don't want to sort of cause any alarms by saying that
Sure.
we are examining that beyond that aggregate level.
All right, a lot to follow up on. We do need to take a short break, though. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This discussion is Cloud Strategies to Fulfill the Mission, sponsored by Motorola Solutions here on Federal News Network.